if you're looking to start your dog on a homemade, complete and balanced dog food recipe, then today I'm going to be going through how to use a formulation software called Balance.it to create a simple recipe. Now, when I say a simple recipe, I'm talking about meat, carbs, fruits and vegetables with maybe some fats. Balance.it is a formulation software that was created to make simple recipes possible. They have a multivitamin supplement as well that they sell, and we are going to be creating a recipe today that uses their multivitamin supplement. Now, in the future, I'm going to create tutorials on making a minimally supplemented recipe using the Balance.it software, making a one pot or crock pot recipe using the Balance.it software, and all of that jazz. But today I really wanted to go through the basics because since Balance.it went through this huge website overhaul, all of the buttons have moved. I've been using Balance.it as a formulation software for about 10 years, and honestly, none of the updates have been as big as this one. They added the USDA database probably about 3 to 4 years ago. They changed their website. Instead of it being Balance.it.com, now it is Balance.it. And then to get to homemade recipes, or to create your homemade recipe, you're going to hit recipes, and then you're going to go ahead and start on putting in your pet's information. Now, the cool thing about the new Balance.it software is that puppy recipes are actually no longer prescription. So you can create puppy recipes now. That is honestly pretty cool. I will say though that I will caution people if they have never cooked before on doing a puppy recipe, because typically when you start out cooking for your dog, it can be a little bit clunky. Like, you're gonna probably mess up 1 or 2 times at first. You may measure something incorrectly, and for a puppy, measuring something incorrectly isn't going to just give your dog maybe some loose stool. It could potentially cause your dog to have like bone abnormalities or abnormal growth. So if you haven't done cooking for your dog before, puppyhood might not be the best time to do that. Or maybe you're going to want to start out really, really small at like 25% of their overall diet. I'm going to go ahead and click on adult dog just to make it simple. You're going to put in your pet's information. So I'm just going to put test recipe on here so that you have that. Then you can change your dog's weight. So we're going to go ahead and assume that our dog is 75 pounds, and then you can change for your dog's age. I'm going to say that your dog is middle age, so 5-6 years old, and then you're going to change if your dog is spayed, neutered, etc. So we have a neutered male, and you can see that the amount of calories actually decreased significantly from neutered to intact. So that's already the first adjustment that this is made. Now, you can go ahead and choose from pre-made recipes. So if you don't want to deal with it, you're like, no, I don't want to choose my ingredients, I'd rather just search a database, you can just press build now, and it's just going to create you a recipe. It's going to spit out a random recipe for you. But if your dog does have allergies or very particular nutritional needs, maybe they do better on like a lower fat diet or something like that, you can actually pick your individual ingredients, and we're going to go ahead and do that now. It's going to say, let me pick individual ingredients. Now you can see a huge change that Balance.it made right away, and that is that they now offer crockpot recipes. So the first thing that you're going to actually have to make a decision on is how you want to meal prep your recipe and how you want to measure your ingredients. So if you go down and don't use the one pot recipe, you are going to be measuring ingredients after cooking. So this means that you're going to pan brown your beef, and then afterwards you are going to measure your ground beef. Same with like your brown rice. You're going to put it in a pot to cook, and then you're going to measure your cooked brown rice. Versus if you're going to use the one pot method, you're going to actually be measuring all of your ingredients raw, which means that you are also going to have to use this USDA search box in order to formulate your recipes. Now, I'm going to give a tutorial on how to do both of these so that you guys can make a decision on which one may be easier for you to do as far as formulation, and also which one might be better for your lifestyle as far as for your dog. Traditionally, all the Balance.it recipes were done by using cooked ingredients. So I'm going to do that first just so that you guys can go through and see that. Now I'm going to start by just choosing some proteins. So this is chicken thighs, this is chicken breast. Now, one thing that I don't love is that you can't actually view the entire description of what some of these things are, especially like the ground beef. It just looks like beef ground. If you press this little eye in the corner, it will pull up the nutritional profile up here, and it will say on the top what the cut is or the grind of the meat is, which may be beneficial for you. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose chicken thigh, and I'm going to choose chicken breast. And then over here next, I'm going to go ahead and choose my carbohydrates. Now, when we're looking at carbohydrate sources, obviously there's grain-free and grain-inclusive carbohydrates. There's also lower and higher fiber carbohydrates. So you do need to make a decision as far as what carbohydrate source may be most appropriate for your dog. Now, if your dog is currently doing well on a certain carbohydrate, obviously I'd probably recommend to choose that one. But if you have no idea, look at what your dog's history is on what your dog has tolerated. So look at the ingredients list on your dog's pet food bag, and you can go ahead and maybe choose ones that are the same as what is on that list. So say if it says wheat, you may want to go with wheat pasta because it contains wheat, versus if your dog's food bag says brown rice, you might want to go with brown rice. I'm going to go ahead and choose brown rice just because it's very, very popular as far as chicken and brown rice for a recipe. Now, as far as fats go, they used to be listed from highest to lowest amount of linoleic acid, which is an essential fatty acid for dogs, which honestly was really convenient. However, with the new software, they've actually chosen to do it alphabetically, which can be confusing. Now, when we look at the different types of fats that are offered, like I said, they offer different types of essential fatty acids. So we have almond, butter, canola oil, coconut oil. Now, butter and coconut oil are more they can be higher in saturated fat. Coconut oil does have about 50% of it as MCTs, or medium chain triglycerides. Our Nordic Naturals and our Lactin are our omega-3 supplements. So for this, since we're making a recipe that contains chicken, which is really high, or it can be high in linoleic acid, we are going to want to probably pair that with a fish oil supplement because we don't have any fish within our recipe. So we're definitely going to want to do the Nordic Naturals, and it's the omega-3. The A is for their algal supplement. That can be good if your dog actually has fish allergies. They can use that as an alternative. So Nordic Naturals. Now, the chicken is actually very high, like I said, in linoleic acid, so we don't need necessarily really concentrated sources. But if you were using something like beef or lamb, that is really low in linoleic acid, so you're going to probably use a very concentrated version of linoleic acid within those recipes. So concentrated types of fats for linoleic acid are going to be canola, corn, sesame, and then walnut oil. Other ones that can go with poultry would be something like a safflower oil. You could use a sunflower oil. You'd have to search for that one in the search box. You could potentially use a flaxseed oil, and those would be fine. Peanut butter, if you are using peanut butter to give medications, including it within your recipe formulation can be particularly useful sometimes, so you can account for the calories, especially if you're giving a lot of meds. I'm going to go ahead and choose sesame oil, just because I have that on hand. And then for vegetables, I usually tell people to choose a variety of fruits and vegetables for their dog's diet. Pick maybe 2 or 3 for each batch, and then rotate through different ones. So I'm going to go ahead and put carrots, broccoli, and then for fruit, I'm going to do blueberries. Now, I like broccoli because if people are stressed for time, or they're looking for really, really simple recipes, you can find riced broccoli, which is already going to be all chopped up for you, and you can just easily steam that or boil it and then use a strainer. For carrots, it's a raw shredded carrot, and then blueberries, you can find them frozen and just pop them right into the recipe, so it makes it really simple. I'm going to go ahead and press Get Recipe. Underneath, though, I wanted to point out that if you were doing a human supplement recipe, so a minimally supplemented recipe, you would be clicking this box. So I'm going to press Get Recipe instead. Now, it's created 2 custom recipes for my test recipe dog. Now, it's created a high protein, high fat recipe, and then a higher carb recipe. Now, it's going to tell you how much it would cost per day to use the Balance.it supplement, how much of the Balance.it supplement that you potentially be doing. Now, what you can do if the nutritional profile isn't what you want, so I can press View Recipe, and then it's going to tell me the nutritional profile here. So this is a moderately high protein recipe, pretty high fat recipe, and then a moderately low carbohydrate recipe. So you'll see that there is 13 deficiencies. That's because this recipe does not have any organ meats. We are going to be relying pretty heavily on the Balance.it supplement in this case to provide vitamins and minerals. So this recipe is created to be simple. For someone that maybe doesn't have a lot of time, or maybe not a lot of accessibility to organ meats, this this would be appropriate, especially as a starter recipe. If you're just starting out to home cook, this may be a really good option. Now on here, I did want to point out we have two different Balance.it supplements. We have the Balance.it Regular, and then down here you have the Balance.it Plus. Now the difference between these two is the Balance.it Regular is not heat stable. The Balance.it Plus is heat stable. And again, this is going to come down to how you plan to feed your dog. If you plan to heat up your dog's food, you need to use the Balance.it Plus because it's heat stable, and it can be added into a batch of food after it's cooled and then reheated one time, versus the Balance.it Regular cannot be reheated, so you'd be feeding that food cold. You can potentially use the Balance.it Regular and basically heat up your dog's food and then add it on, if that makes sense. However, it might just, as far as ease goes, be better to use the Balance.it Plus. But I point this out because the amount that you use of each as far as in teaspoons is different. If you wanted to go ahead and weigh it in grams, you definitely can. You would need to do some math in order to convert the teaspoons to grams, but usually when I went ahead and looked at it, it's actually about the same amount of grams. So usually the 21 grams will be of either the Balance.it Regular or the Balance.it Plus, because the Balance.it Plus is 3.5 grams per teaspoon. I would definitely always double check though your particular supplement that you're getting, because the supplements can change over time, so may be adjusted, and that's also why you may want to go in and actually reformulate your recipe on the Balance.it software every year, because they may have updates that come up. You may want to, if you had a previous recipe, go in, put in the same ingredients that you had in the same amounts, and then actually see if the supplementation is the same or not. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to show you how you would adjust individual ingredients. Because say you had this recipe that you made before on the previous Balance.it, but you're like, okay, well, but all these ingredient amounts are different. They're not the same as they were before. You're going to press this button in the middle. It says Adjust Recipe. And then you can actually go in and adjust individual ingredient amounts. You can also adjust your macronutrient profile. Now, with a simple recipe like this, it can be easy to do this, but I find that it's more accurate, or you have less chance of having errors if you actually do it manually with the adjusted ingredient amounts. Now, one of the other really big updates to Balance.it that I like is that we used to have these really weird increments of measuring things. For example, this is like ground chicken crumbles. 3 ounces was your increment, and then you had to do like 2 7/8 of 3 ounces, which is like, I know, wrapping your mind around that is really hard. You can now just drag down and put all of these in grams. You no longer have to have them in weird half increments, which is so nice. So anyways, we have on here, you can see that we have chicken thigh, we have ground chicken, and then we also have brown rice. You have the Nordic Naturals. This is in milliliters. I can change this now to teaspoons, which is great if you measure in teaspoons and not milliliters. Or vice versa, you can also change that around. And then you can see here the blueberries and stuff. I can change this all to grams, and it's great. Now, the other thing that's changed on here is you can search for ingredients. Now, I thought that I had selected chicken breast, but it's actually selected as ground chicken. So I'm going to go ahead and search here for chicken breast. And look, I can get boneless skinless roasted chicken breast. I can add it into my recipe, and then I can get rid of this ground chicken crumble that I accidentally put in because I didn't mean to, and switch it out in my recipe, which is great. And that's supposed to be 200 grams. And then I can go in as well with, you can see that blueberries, when they're in a cup, it was a weird quantity, but if you plan to measure everything in grams, you can just go through and change all of your amounts so that it reflects in grams and have it all be even. That can be really beneficial if you're going to a store and you want to, say, get a pound of something for your meal prep. If it's in grams versus cups, you can more easily understand how much you need for your meal prep, which before I used to have to do some weird conversions or have to kind of do weird amounts of cups to get all my amounts equal to make meal prep a lot easier. So this is just going to make it so that it's streamlined a lot more. Now, the other thing, by going ahead and adding in the chicken breast here instead of having the ground chicken, is that we can go ahead and potentially edit this recipe to be lower in fat versus high in fat. So the previous recipe was fairly high in fat, so I can potentially edit it. And like I said, I can also edit these amounts so that they're rounded out, so I don't have to do really weird measurements or anything like that with these items. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in and then update my recipe and see what my macronutrient profile looks like. Now, so you can go ahead and press view recipe or see nutritional profile. So I'm going to just press view recipe again because that's where we viewed it before. And you can see now the profile's actually changed. It's higher in protein, a little bit lower in fat, and then like more lower in carbohydrates. So generally speaking, this composition, anything above about 30% protein is probably going to be a moderate to high protein recipe. And I'm going to talk a little bit about individual nutritional profile, like grams, in a second. But typically this would be a high protein amount if it's over about 35%. If you're over or close to 40 to 50%, that's considered a higher fat recipe. And then if you're below 20%, that's usually considered a lower carbohydrate recipe. However, that's not always true. It kind of depends a little bit on nutrient density here. So to really know, you press see nutritional profile. Now, when we go into see nutritional profile, this is actually similar to, but not the same as the Balance.it software. It can be nice in the sense of if you're making a minimally supplemented recipe, you can sort by different things. So if you want to see what things are deficient, it's going to automatically sort them to the top. So you can see what your Balance.it supplement is covering is all of this. When you do your minimally supplemented recipe, it might only be 2 or 3 or 4 things that it's supplementing instead. Now, instead, we can also sort by like nutrient name. And then for on the bottom here, we can see all nutrients. It's going to show you the essential ones within the first part that you do. But there are non-essential nutrients, like you can see all the different types of fats. Not all of those are essential fatty acids. Now, typically, what I would do, if say I wanted to know the amount of protein that's within the recipe, I'm going to press Control Find, then search for protein. Now, obviously, there's 2 other areas of protein. But on here, you can see this is the nutrient profile. It says 96. Now, anything that is above 90 is considered a high protein recipe. Typically, we want high protein recipes for dogs that are obese prone or that are going through weight loss, that are on caloric restriction because they need more protein per calorie consumed. For more moderately active dogs, they usually consume plenty of calories, so having something that's around 75 to 90 grams per 1,000 kilocalories usually easily satisfies their protein needs. When we start to get above 90 for those moderately active dogs, sometimes what will happen is some dogs will experience weight loss because protein is actually a really poor energy source, and the dogs will have to use that for energy because energy is going to be their most important driving factor as far as nutrients, because they need calories to sustain their activity level. Now, for low protein recipes, the minimum is 45, but you may want to go towards 60 if your dog maybe is having issues with protein metabolism. So this would be dogs that say are maybe older. They might have stage 1 kidney disease where we don't quite need to do dietary intervention as far as restricted phosphorus or something like that yet. Maybe we want borderline phosphorus and we want borderline low protein for that stage 1. So in those dogs, getting down to about 60 might be appropriate. But typically we usually look for diets that are around 75 for like the typical moderately active dog. Now, for next one, I'm going to go ahead and talk about lipids. So total lipid or fat content here, it says 42 grams. So anything between 30 to 50 grams is considered a moderately fat diet or a moderate fat diet. So 42 is on like the higher end of the moderate range. If you go above 50, think of more of like your endurance athlete or your dog that is going through like recovery from a condition where they need maybe more calories to help them with recovery, or for endurance, they just need it for energy. Some particular diseases and conditions that need fat to help, like say, repair the skin barrier may benefit from a higher fat diet as well. Now, when we look below 30 grams, those are the dogs that probably are sensitive to fat. So dogs that have pancreatitis, things like that, might go towards the 20 grams per 1,000 kilocal range. But typically, most dogs are going to want between 30 to kind of 50. With our more obese prone dogs being on the lower end, so around 35, and then maybe our endurance athletes or our moderately active dogs being on the higher end towards 50. Now, next thing that you can look for is carbs. So carbohydrates, and then there is no nutrient requirement for carbohydrates, so that's why you have to press the C more on the bottom. But basically with a diet, if we are looking at higher carbohydrates diets, it's going to be above 90. At about 50, that's like a moderately low carbohydrate diet. So this would be considered something that's more moderately low. The other thing that you can see here is we do have the total calories displayed, and then on here, oh, it's under C, nutrient profile, actually. It gives you the caloric density. This is something that's actually new to the new software, is they give you the kcals per gram, which can be useful. Say if you're combination feeding or something like that, a recipe like this, you can potentially calculate out very easily how much of this recipe you can be feeding your dog, depending on how many calories you want to supply from your homemade diet. The other thing is it gives you the total grams of the recipe. Again, can be super useful as far as for combo feeding, making some calculations. Before, I used to have to calculate this stuff by hand for my combo feeding patients. For these recipes, if you wanted to show them to your vet, kind of to get approval on them, you can download them. So you can press this little button and download them. If you download this section, I guess, the viewing section, it's going to give you the amount of Balance.it Plus. So if you want to know that information easily, you'll probably want to download this page. It's also going to give you directions, conversions, all of that kind of stuff. Now, if you do have a vet that wants to know particular nutrients within a recipe, say your dog has atopy or seasonal allergies, and they want to make sure that you have a certain dosing of like fish oil in a recipe, you're probably going to want to go ahead and download this nutrient profile one, because they can go ahead and find on here. So if I search for EPA, it's going to give me the amount of EPA and DHA within a recipe. Now, I think for EPA and DHA, you actually need to press more in order to find all of them, because yeah, there it is. So it'll give you the amount per 1,000 kilocalories, and your veterinarian can take that information and compare it to your dog's weight and how much your dog is eating in order to calculate out if any additional supplementation is needed. And the cool thing about Balance.it is you can potentially include that supplementation within the rest. The next thing that I wanted to go ahead and show you is that there is a save button function, so you can actually save it right here and then reference back to it with your account. So on your account, you can go reference all of your previous recipes, and this can be really useful because you may have several recipes that you use either in rotation, or maybe because certain ingredients are available at certain times of the year versus others. I know I have like a minimally supplemented recipe, I have a Balance.it recipe, actually a couple of them for my dogs, and then I have like the alternative recipe when nothing's in stock. If there is anything else with Balance.it that you wanted me to go over or talk about, definitely leave questions below. Like, I will include links on previous information. So I do have a Balance.it video that from the last formulation software that still works as far as part 1 for figuring out like the macronutrient profile and the ingredients that are appropriate for your dog. So I will go ahead and link that in like a card above somewhere here so you can watch that.